Long ago, in a realm of snow-white peaks and ancient forests, you find yourself drawn to a grand marble hall lit by flickering sconces. The air holds the faint scent of cold stone warmed by hearth fires, and at its far end stands a gilded-looking glass framed with curling vines of gold leaf. You step closer, chest rising and falling with anticipation, as the mirror's surface shimmers like liquid starlight. It had once belonged to a queen whose beauty was sung across courts, but today you're here to learn how that same vanity sowed the seeds of envy and tragedy. So gentle your pulse might slow as you drift. On the day of Snow White's birth, the queen stood before this very mirror and spoke her usual chant. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest one of all? For years, its voice had soothed her, praising her flawless skin and regal posture, comforting her in sleepless nights. But when the mirror paused, its smoky depths catching the torchlight, it whispered a name that wasn't hers. You can almost hear the tiniest catch in her voice as the word Snow White left its lips for the first time. That moment, historians still argue whether the mirror's prophecy was born of magic or of a courtier's cruel joke. But what you feel is undeniable. The first tremor of the queen's heart, stricken by a jealousy she had never known. You watch the queen cradle her infant with a soft coo. The child's hair as dark as onyx and skin as pale as the snow outside the palace windows. You imagine the hush that fell over the chamber, candlelight pooling around them, as the mirror spoke again, more urgently. Her beauty will eclipse your own. Something about the way its words echoed in the marble hall, long, ghostly, unsettling, makes your scalp prickle. A fringe tidbit tells us the mirror was crafted from a meteorite that fell into the Black Forest centuries ago, imbued with secret powers that even the kingdom's greatest mage couldn't unravel. Some say it hears the queen's voice as faithfully as a loyal hound, while others whisper that it hungers for new reflections to consume. As you lean closer, the queen's expression shifts from regal satisfaction to brittle fear. She smooths her dark hair with trembling fingers, reminding you of every time you fussed over your own reflection, hoping the mirror would affirm your worth. You probably won't survive this mirror's judgment without feeling a pang of your own vanity. Over the next few nights, the queen's restless sleep becomes a ritual of haunted anxieties. Visitors report hearing her mutter in her sleep about stolen youth, comparing creases in her brow to imagined lines of age. Historians still argue whether these nightmares were true or a clever embellishment by palace gossips, but the lullaby of her insomnia is one you'll carry into your own dreams. By the time Snow White is 4, her laughter rings through the corridors pure and bell-like, a reminder of everything the queen has lost. Each giggle is a chorus of innocence that no mirror can replicate. It is said that the child learned her first lullaby from the palace minstrel, a song of moonlight dancing on dew, sung as softly as a mother's hush. And every time Snow White reaches for her mother's hand, the queen feels a sharp twist of jealousy. How a child can outshine a monarch, how the laughter of youth can mock the hollow echoes of power. On a chilly morning when the frost still clings to stained glass panes, the queen stands before the mirror once more. Her reflection is flawless, yet she gazes at it with eyes that cannot find peace. The mirror's surface ripples, and it speaks with measured gravity. Snow White will one day sit upon a throne of hearts, and you shall fade into memory. You feel the words drift across the stone, lingering like a dying song. A queer detail survives in a scratched inscription at the mirror's frame. He who gazes too long loses more than time. Whether inscribed by the original smith or by a later hand, that warning chills you deeper than any winter wind. With trembling lips, the queen commands her huntsmen to take the princess into the forest and never return. You sense the hush that fell on the court, the courtier's uneasy glances, the huntsman's guilt-worn face. Historians still argue whether the queen truly meant for harm, or whether she believed the child would merely be left to wander until rescued by fate. But the mirror's prophecy has clouded her mercy. You shiver at the thought of how power and fear can twist even the gentlest of hearts. And so Snow White's life veers from palace comfort into the unknown. But before that fateful hunt, the mirror's jealous whispers claim their first victim. Not the princess herself, but the queen's own sense of security. You take a slow breath, letting the hush of the marble hall settle around you. The mirror gleams silently, as if pleased, And you realize this is only the beginning. When dawn breaks golden against the castle spires, you imagine Snow White stepping into her finest gown, unaware that this is her final bow at court. She smiles at the huntsman, an aging man with kind eyes and a heart heavy with doubt, as he offers his arm. Outside, the courtyard bustles. Chambermaids fluff skirts, stable hands lead sleepy horses, and a lone minstrel plucks a gentle tune on his lute. Yet Snow White's laughter rings clear, a fragile promise of joy that will soon slip into silence. The huntsman leads her to the forest's edge, a wall of ancient oaks draped in moss and tangled vines. He explains that they will gather wildflowers and water for the queen's midday feast. You sense the hush falling, the way the forest seems to lean in closer, as if witnessing a secret too heavy for sunlight. Snow White's skirts brush ferns, her pale hands reaching for bluebells that bow under dew. Fringed tales hold that this forest is laced with old magic. Wolf packs that communicate in low howls, trees that shift their own paths after midnight, and stones engraved with runes no scholars ever deciphered. You trudge alongside Snow White, noting the birdsong that trails her footsteps like applause. The huntsman's dagger glints faintly at his belt, but he barely glances at it. His purpose is kindness, not cruelty. At a brook, you watch Snow White dip her pail into clear water, peering at her rosy reflection. She hums a tune that court musicians later borrowed for a lullaby, and you feel the melody warm the air around you. Suddenly, the huntsman's face darkens. He cannot carry out the queen's command. Historians still argue whether it was pity or fear of a forest curse that stopped his blade, but you can almost hear his soul sigh as he whispers, "Run, child, run." Snow White stands frozen wide-eyed, as the huntsman's voice trembles. "Fly into the heart of this wood," he urges. "Find shelter in the unknown. Your life is worth more than a promise to the queen." You sense the weight of destiny in those words. Together, they weave through tangles of undergrowth until the palace's gleaming rooftops vanish behind a curtain of branches. The forest seems to sigh around you, branches stirring in sympathy, or perhaps in warning. Night falls swiftly, snuffing out the last embers of sunset. You shiver as wolves' distant howls punctuate the dark. Yet Snow White's footsteps remain steady, guided by flickers of moonlight through the canopy. She presses on until her legs tremble, and her heart pounds like a drum in a silent amphitheater. When exhaustion overtakes her, she collapses beneath a towering oak, its roots forming a cradle between earth and sky. The stars will overhead, and for a moment you almost believe the constellations whisper lullabies of protection. Yet the forest is no quiet refuge. Strange lights flicker, will-o'-the-wisps that dance just beyond reach, and the air seems to carry murmurs of travelers long lost. Some scholars still argue whether those lights were spirits guiding her, or illusions meant to lure wanderers astray. You feel a tingle crawl up your spine as the wind sighs through the leaves, as if the forest itself is watching, waiting. With dawn's first light, Snow White awakens to an eerie calm. The brook's gentle gurgle becomes her compass again, leading her deeper into the wood. You follow as she stumbles upon a small clearing, and there, tucked among towering mushrooms and twisted roots, stands a quaint cottage, so out of place it might have sprung from a child's dream. Its crooked chimney puffs a thin ribbon of smoke that curls into the sky, promising warmth and shelter. And as Snow White approaches, you hold your breath, wondering if kindness or danger awaits. The moment Snow White pushes open the cottage door, you feel the hush of suspended wonder. Inside, 7 tiny wooden chairs circle a low table strewn with crumbs of bread and half-emptied mugs of sweet barley brew. The air is warm, scented with thyme and wildflowers, and beams of morning light slant through small-paned windows, laying patchwork ribbons across rough-hewn floorboards. You step inside beside Snow White, whose pale cheeks flush with both relief and trepidation. At first, there is only silence, so complete you can hear your own heartbeat echo. Then clattering sounds emerge from a room beyond, tiny footsteps and muffled thumps, like pebbles rolling across wood. You imagine the 7 dwarfs, each barely waist-high, bearded and clad in patched tunics, rushing to investigate. A fringed tale holds that these dwarfs once served as guardians of an enchanted mine, their craftsmanship prized across kingdoms. Some historians still argue whether they were miners cursed by ancient magic or forest spirits bound to protect hidden treasures. As the door creaks further, the first dwarf appears, eyes wide as saucers hat askew. He peers up at Snow White with an expression of astonished welcome. Before another, rounder dwarf totters into view, wiping flour from his brown beard. Behind them shuffle 5 more, each with their own quirks. One balancing a lantern, another clutching a chipped plate, and the tallest of the lot peeking curiously over his shorter brothers. You smile at their earnest confusion, their eyebrows hopping like startled birds. Snow White curtsies with a gentle grace that disarms any suspicion. "My name is Snow White," she says, voice soft as moss. "I mean no harm, I only seek shelter." You sense the dwarf's heart soften. The shyest of them, who historians named Doc in later retellings, though scholars still argue if that was his original moniker, steps forward and offers his hand. Snow White takes it and steadies herself, her breath a quiet sigh of gratitude. They lead her to the table and offer bowls of porridge sweetened with honey and berries. You taste the warm oat cream on your tongue, as comforting as a mother's embrace. Outside, the forest stirs, but inside the cottage the world feels paused. Each dwarf says little at first, but their eyes brim with curiosity and kindness. Fringe whispers claim that their cottage furniture is carved from the heartwood of the oldest tree in the forest, enchanted to last as long as the forest stands. Whether myth or truth, you feel its ancient solidity supporting you. After the meal, Snow White helps clear the table. You watch her small hands wipe the plank smooth, her laughter rising as one dwarf tries to juggle nuts, only to have them scatter. A ripple of gentle humor weaves through the cottage, stitching new memories into its beams. Before long, Snow White and her 7 companions settle into a routine. She hums sweet tunes while they shape tools or tend a tiny hearth fire. You feel the rhythm in your bones, the steady, simple cadence of kindness and shared purpose. As dusk approaches, the dwarfs each offer Snow White a bedroll beside their own little bunks, insisting she rest first. You sense their collective warmth like a lullaby, their unspoken vow to stand guard through the night. Outside, the forest shadows grow long, but inside the cottage, all is calm and safe. You allow yourself to exhale fully, letting the cottage's glow settle like a soft blanket around your shoulders. And so, beneath lantern glow and woodland hush, Snow White finds sanctuary among curious companions, her new family of 7 who would guard her through trials yet to come. You lean back, ready to dream alongside her.